When I say resale values, your brain probably screams, boring! But what if we're not talking about a Honda Odyssey? What if we're talking about something more interesting?
For example, this multi-generational trio of Ford GTs. Are we going to use a discussion of Kelley Blue Book's resale values as justification to drive supercars? Maybe. But I promise we'll all learn something along the way. First though, let's talk about the cars. We've got a 2018 Ford GT, a 2005 GT, and a Superformance GT40 Mark I replica. Sorry, we couldn't find anyone to hand over the keys to an original GT40 for some reason. For a speedy rundown of each, let's tap someone knowledgeable. Kelley Blue Book's executive publisher Carl Brower actually owns this car and is on the list to buy one of these, so yeah, he'll do just fine.
This is a 2018 Ford GT. This is the third generation GT. There will only be 1,000 of these made over a 4-year period. I think one of the most distinctive parts of this car is what's called the flying buttress. It actually allows for a large amount of air to pass between the passenger cell and the outer fenders, and then direct it into the mid-engine twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6 that sits behind driver and passenger. That engine makes 647 horsepower, and it's capable of pushing this car up to 216 miles an hour. What looks like integrated rear spoiler is actually deployable. It'll do that in track mode instantly, or in sport mode if you go above a certain speed. It'll also rotate near vertical to give you extra braking force when you hit the brakes hard. This car was meant to beat Ferrari on the racetrack, just like the original GT40 of over 50 years ago. The mid-generation, the 0506 Ford GT, that one was meant to beat Ferrari on the street. The car was benchmarked after the Ferrari 360. First and foremost, it's a true GT Grand Tour. I have driven one of these from Los Angeles to Denver and back in one shot without stopping anywhere except for fuel. They're 3-pedal cars. They've got an actual transmission that you have to shift yourself. No paddles, no hydraulic clutches, it's all you. And this one is powered by a 5.4-liter supercharged V8. It makes 550 horsepower. You see a lot of similarity with the 60s Ford GT. It did pay great homage. I can't imagine a greater beginning for a historic automobile line like the Ford GT than the original GT40. This particular GT40 is not an original from the 60s. It was actually built recently by a company called Superformance. 90+% of this car would mechanically swap into the old one. In fact, they were even able to continue the serial numbers from the 60s on these newer ones. So if the flying buttress is the craziest part of the new GT, what's the craziest part of the old GT? It's got to be the door design. The reason they did this is because they used to have what they called a Le Mans start. You actually started as a standing driver, and when they dropped the checkered flag, you had to run across the street, jump up on the seat, and then drop down. This is the only car in the history of Le Mans to win the race twice. The same VIN number vehicle won Le Mans 2 years in a row. No other car company has ever done that. A car that looked just like this did it twice.
Clearly, each of these GTs offers a unique form of badassery, but how does that relate to this video's resale value premise?
Well, when Carl bought his 2005 GT, it cost around $150,000. Now it's worth twice that. If in the 1960s you'd had the forethought to nab an original Ford GT for about 20 grand, your car would now be worth millions. Yes, millions. With history as our guide, any guesses on what might happen to prices for the $500,000 2018 Ford GT? In one fun example, celebrity wrestler/actor John Cena allegedly sidestepped Ford's 2-year resale restriction, selling his 2018 GT for a tidy profit. The exact price hasn't been revealed, but we've heard rumors it's well north of $1 million.
The key takeaway is that, unlike most cars, Ford GT resale values increase over time.
Even better, these are appreciating assets you can drive. What's that like? Here's Kelley Blue Book's executive editor Michael Harley in the 2018 GT.
You know, this thing feels fast, but there is a much more visceral punch in the stomach from the big old V8s. This is a turbocharged V6. There's a little bit of a delay, especially if you're in one of the taller gears. The best way to get this thing to really punch in the back is drop it down to second and third. Build up the boost and then mash the throttle. This is unquestionably faster than the other two, but initially, right behind the wheel, on the street, it doesn't feel it. Let's try the old paddles. Dual clutch, lightning fast response, but I'm still not getting the ear-to-ear grin that I get with the manual gearbox. One thing I've really noticed about the 18 is the brake technology. The 18 GT is running the latest, which is carbon ceramic brakes, which are virtually immune to heat buildup. You step on the brakes, your instantaneous pedal response goes directly to those calipers. It stops on a dime, adding a ton of confidence. For me personally, I'll actually give up a couple hundred horsepower if I can get better brakes. You jump in the GT40 and you jump in the 05 GT, and there's a little bit of suspension compliance, maybe a little bit of body flex. The 18 feels like it's carved out of a block of carbon fiber that was thrown in a CNC machine and out came a Ford GT. There's zero body flex, there's zero body roll, and I have it on one of the softer settings right now. I cannot imagine what it would feel like in the track mode where this thing drops down on its haunches and the fenders are literally rubbing on the tires themselves. You know, everyone talks about these generation gaps, and everybody initially would think, wow, the technology gap really has to happen between that 60s car and the 05 car. But that's the misconception. The real technology gap is that 13-year span between the 05 and the 18, because then all of a sudden now we have traction control, stability control that allow even the most inexperienced driver to become bloody fast with very little skill. You drive the 05, you drive the 60s car, and it's a white knuckle ride because you start to get that car sideways and your brain is the only computer working to straighten it out. It's a thrill, it's an adrenaline rush, and it what makes those cars more exciting to drive. If I was going to drive New York to LA and back, I'd take the 05.
It might lack the sophistication of the 2018, but Carl's 2005 GT remains a world-class supercar.
This car weighs about 3,500 pounds. This particular one's been modified. It makes 618 horsepower at the rear wheels, probably about 700 at the crank. The hydraulic steering in this car is more intuitive than modern electric assisted steering, and it absolutely adds to the experience. You've got heel and toe capability with the 3 pedals. You've got the great shifter here from the Ricardo transmission. Like most modern supercars, this one also has 4-wheel disc brakes. They will haul the car down with full confidence from 100 plus miles an hour. You put it together and you end up with this great man-machine interface. This car is still pretty old school compared to some modern supercars, right? It doesn't have an active suspension. You get one setting only. It doesn't have stability or traction control. In fact, the only thing that separates this car from a 1960s racer is ABS. It does have anti-lock brakes. Otherwise, if you don't know how to drive the car, there's no electronic nanny to save you. You crash. Now, I've got a lot of experience with this car because I've had it for 13 years and I've put 31,000 miles on it. And because it was designed more as a road car more than a race car, you end up with a vehicle that's much easier to drive in real conditions without feeling compromised for those purposes. When you decide you want to go, you go. The kind of noise that engine makes behind you, it's raw by 2018 standards, and just enough raw for someone like me. I love it.
The 2005 GT is unsullied by modern electronics, but the Superformance GT40 takes unvarnished high-performance driving to another level.
First impression is that the car smells like gasoline thanks to the carburetors, and the straight pipe exhaust is loud, especially when you press the throttle. See? Lots of noise, lots of speed, 560 horsepower, and a 2,300 pound curb weight will do that for you. The transmission is a 5-speed dogleg gearbox. That means first is down and to the left. The clutch is super heavy, and finding third gear when you're in fourth is a bit tricky, but for driver involvement, this little lever is very involving. The technology in the Superformance GT40 Mark I is pretty basic, except for one detail, the speedometer. It's a GPS speedometer. Guess what? It doesn't work. When it comes to adding technology to an old GT40, the GT40 says, no thanks. As you'd expect, the steering is completely unassisted, but the efforts aren't as heavy as you might imagine, even if you're picking your way through a parking lot. The reward for your extra little bit of effort is a level of detail about what the front tires are doing that you will not find in a modern car. I challenge you to find a more communicative vehicle in the modern context. It doesn't happen. In similar fashion, the brakes are completely mechanical. It takes a lot of effort, but they are effective. When you drive a GT40, every day is leg day. When you think of the concept of fun, there's many kinds of fun. There's like an evening at Chuck E. Cheese, and then there's like, I survived a knife fight. This leans a little towards the knife fight edge of the spectrum. Unlike cars that are built today, where your mind can drift from the task at hand, the Superformance GT40 Mark I demands constant attention. If you like driving, and I mean really like driving, this is the ultimate plaything.
Insanely fast and delightfully profitable, there are few better automotive investments than a Ford GT.
But what if, like me, you don't have the money or access to buy one?
Then Kelley Blue Book's 5-year cost-to-own data is a doubly important way to maximize your non-exotic car buying dollar. And just to keep you engaged, we're going to toss in some random GT shots while we educate. Let's say you love car A, but car B is a bit cheaper. Kelley Blue Book's 5-year cost-to-own incorporates a bunch of data, including projected resale values, to estimate total expenditures over an average ownership period. Run the numbers, and the pricier car you prefer might be the cheaper choice over time. Voila! Unassailable financial justification to buy the thing you want. You're welcome. On that note, for better or worse, humans have a knack for justifying our desires. But that tendency is far less nefarious when supported by hard data.
In the automotive realm, the most truly justifiable purchase is one that services both your wallet and your soul. Now, which one does that best?